Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory, the Sinamic First Nation. Our clerk this morning will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Finance and Audit Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. As the province is now in Phase 3 of the reopening plan, question period has been reinstated for those in attendance for agenda items only. Question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, I will call up those who have signed up to the podium to address council. And the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, I don't believe we have any. I can tell you that Councillor Gesselbrock is involved in a Zoom meeting involving the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and has requested, given the order of items, that he be available to speak to the fossil fuel divestment and responsible investing section of the meeting. So we'll see how the time goes, but what I may suggest is, I see Mr. Harding and Mr. Gruter here. I may suggest that we bring the Sir Roxman Stadium project update earlier in the meeting, if that's possible. I'm seeing Mr. Groot nodding, Mr. Harding. If in fact we're not, I'm assuming the delegations are going to take a little bit of time this morning. They want to make a pitch, so I'm sure he said he'd be available by 9:20. So subject to that, a motion for adoption of the agenda. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Hemmens, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have no presentations, but we do have delegations this morning. The first is for a request for Fieldhouse as part of the Bevan Park 10-year plan. We have John Davis, Mark Chase, Michelle Ney, and Chris Pierce. And who's going to be speaking? Good morning. If you come forward to the mic and could introduce yourself and give us your address, that would be great. And welcome, and thank you for this.
Councilman and staff members of the City of Nanaimo, I wish to thank you very much for this opportunity to present to you today. My name is John Davis, and I represent a delegation for the racket sports of pickleball, badminton, and tennis. What we are here today for is to bring your attention to what we feel is a tremendous shortfall in indoor playing space for our three sports. And to address that shortfall, we have looked into and are proposing that we build a field house at Bevan Park. I do have some field notes here, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use my notes or just go off the presentation itself. So we'll start by looking at the presentation. What we're proposing is the construction of a field house at Bevan Park, and that field house will support the three sports that I have mentioned. I have with me today also representatives of our three sports, and I'd like just to introduce them briefly and have them give you about a 15-second overview of their credentials. Representing the sport of badminton, we have Janice Walker. And Janice, if you would say hi and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Janice. I've worked with badminton from the junior level to college, and I'm a master's athlete. That's my background.
And we have Mr. Dave Eaton, who represents and has knowledge in the game of pickleball.
I've been around pickleball for 8 years overall. Been involved with local club president for 3 years and executive for 6 years. And I'm also now on the board of Pickleball BC, which is a very strong organization representing the sport throughout the province. And I'm ready to move it forward even further.
Thank you very much. I was going to say, if you're going to speak much more than just an introduction, I really would ask you to come forward to the podium. So this is a public meeting, and your stars have staged and screened today, so the public needs to hear and see you.
Okay, and thirdly, I'd like to introduce Mr. Mark Chase, who couldn't physically be with us here today, but Mark is with us through a Zoom session. And Mark, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the one Zoom delegate here, so hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thanks for the intro. My name is Mark Chase. I'm the president of the Nanaimo Area Indoor Tennis Society. So It's a nonprofit society that's formed to advocate for sufficient indoor all-weather playing space for the sport of tennis in Nanaimo. I've been a resident of Nanaimo for almost 30 years now, playing tennis for almost the same amount of time.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, delegates, for participating today. What we feel is that our vision for additional space, for playing space, would be ideally suited for Bevan Park. We have in front of you a rough outline of where it would situate itself in Bevan Park, and we also have some points as to why we think Bevan Park would be ideal. And if I could just run through those. We think it's firstly an excellent location within the city because it's very central to everybody who's interested in playing these three sports. We have excellent access and egress, as you're aware, to Bevan Park. There's ample parking for all sorts of participants at all three sports concurrently or consecutively, as the case may be. There are nearby in-ground services, so construction and provision of those services would not be an issue. There's suitable underutilized space as identified in the 10-year development plan for Bevan Park. And the proposed facility as we bring it forward today is very consistent with the 10-year development plan for the nature of the type of buildings that would be built on that site. So the concept would be that we have approximately a 40,000 square foot structure that would house each of our three sports. And in doing so, we would look for a facility that had two separate playing surfaces. Pickleball and badminton would share an area that was made up with a hardwood floor. We could provide 6 courts for those sports, and we would also provide an asphalt treated surface for the game of tennis, and I think that works out. This is an architectural sketch of what the layout would look like. As you can see, we have the 4 tennis courts and the 6 badminton/pickleball courts. And there is provision for a mezzanine over top of the reception area where we could have table tennis or another small area sport contained as well and provided for. We think there's a fair number of benefits that the community would realize from the development of such a facility, and we'll take a look at those benefits with respect to health of our community, social and cultural aspects and benefits, as well as economic benefits that we're going to be able to realize. On the health side, I think everybody is in agreement that an active community is a healthy community, and anything we can do to keep people moving in our community through all our age groups would be a tremendous benefit and reduction in total health costs across the board. In terms of social benefits, if you'll take a look at what we have up there, we have some very funny looking people. I think what we do is we try and provide an active and happy social environment in all our sports for our participants, and anybody who is a citizen of this community is very, very welcome to participate in those sessions as well. From an economic point of view, we have some full-time benefits in terms of full-time job. We have some part-time economic benefits and construction costs, increase in property values. And one of the things that's very important as well is that in a growing community, having a facility such as this and the capacity to hold indoor sports, where our weather over the winter months is not conducive to outdoor play, is certainly a benefit and attracts new citizens into our community. It also provides opportunities for vendors and suppliers both on site and I see there's a timer going. It's got me 4 seconds. Am I overrunning my 5 minutes? Or?
Ms. Gurry, is this, I should have asked at the start, is this an invited delegation or?
No, Your Worship. They are delegations that signed up, so they do have the 5 minutes, yeah.
I can talk longer if you want. I'm pretty happy talking, yeah. So, but in conclusion, what we would like to say is that we think our proposal is not only timely, it's concise and accurate and addresses a very, very important need for our community, and that is the provision of additional indoor playing space for the winter months for pickleball, badminton, and tennis. And I know each of our 3 sports, whom are represented in this delegation by very knowledgeable people, can answer any of your questions with respect to what we currently are using with respect to indoor space, the threats we see, and the growth of our sports, particularly in pickleball and tennis and badminton, are very vibrant and growing sports and played by people of all ages. So with that, I thank you for listening to me, and we're prepared to field questions. And happily, I would have my delegates and representatives come to the microphone to answer those questions. Should we get them to all stand forward now?
I was just going to say, I'm in council's hands, but we have two separate delegations, all related to the same proposal. And I'm wondering if we want to hear from both delegations first and then questions?
Your Worship, they're different. They're different proposals.
Yeah, Your Worship.
They're different. Yeah.
One's in Bow and one, but they're all involving sports, is what
Yes.
I'm getting at. So,
Yeah, Your Worship, I would recommend that you have questions for this delegation group first, to ask them now, and then have them sit down and invite the next group up.
all right. Questions from council, and Councillor Thorpe first.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mainly wanted to make comment, if that's all right, briefly. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I was very interested in your proposal. I have a hard copy of it here, which I've been looking at. And I also spent time last night looking at the Bevan Park Master Plan update from 2015. And I'm very, in principle, supportive of your idea. I think you've obviously put some time and thought into this. And I think it's timely because, number one, through the Reimagine Nanaimo, we are asking citizens to identify needs in our community. And secondly, as you may or may not be aware, the mayor currently has a task force with a subcommittee delegated to examine infrastructure needs in our city. And I think it's really important that citizens who can identify needs for facilities, whether they be sports or otherwise, let council know that so that they can be added to our list to examine. Obviously, and you'll agree and recognize that facilities take time to build. It's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of needs in our city and we have to prioritize them. But the first step is to get them on the list so that we can examine them to see how worthy they are and what support they have and what backing they have. So I just appreciate the fact that you've brought this forward today as at least a first step, and we can take it from there. And I might have questions for Mr. Harding regarding the Bevan Park site after your delegation has been seated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thorpe, and I do hope I'm alive to see the shovel go in the ground for our project.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Your Worship. For the delegation, I was just wondering if you know the number
She's
of total
coming in
people
by
that participate in your 3 sports.
Zoom as well. Sorry I should have advised those members of the audience. We do have a couple of council members who are attending via Zoom. Welcome to the modern age. Go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I was just asking the delegation if they knew the total number of people that participated in the 3 sports.
If I understand the question, how many people do we know participate in the 3 sports?
Yes.
What we are aware of that prior to the COVID outbreak and pandemic, we had over 1,000 registered members of the various clubs across our 3 sports. But we cannot account for public play, and those would be participants in the sports who are not part of a regular organization, but play in some of the parks in an ad hoc fashion. So we have at least 1,000 members prior to COVID across our 3 sports.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone further? I can't resist saying this morning. Notwithstanding his youthful and healthy appearance, Mr. Eaton and I, 50 years ago, got to know each other as we started at Malspina College, as it then was, just up the hill, a building that no longer exists. So I'm particularly pleased to see you here this morning. And I'm advised by some members of council that I should be taking up pickleball, amongst other things. Yes, I see Councillor Brown, who sagely suggested that earlier, nodding his head. Much appreciate the thought that's gone into this. And let me ask an obvious question. Have you even spoken to anybody who has any idea what this would cost potentially?
Maybe. We have estimates anywhere from $300 a square foot, but that's going to depend largely on the nature of the surface that we're playing on. I know right now that pickleball is played largely indoors at the rec center at Oliver Woods, and that floor is an ideal surface for both badminton and pickleball. And I don't want to speak on behalf of badminton, but I know right now they're a sport that must play indoors, and very much appreciate being able to play on a sprung hardwood floor. And the same certainly is true of pickleball when we do play indoors.
Okay. I might also add that it was in 1979 or 80 that I got to know Councillor Thorpe, who is a highly competitive and vicious badminton player. We used to play at the Franklin Street Gym, and now we play on council.
That's right.
I very much appreciate you taking the time this morning and the support for the project, and certainly the numbers that you've mentioned speak well of the importance to the community. So, if there's no further questions?
I wonder if maybe I could give some answers to some questions that have gone unasked.
Oh, you know what? This morning I'm feeling kind, nostalgic, and generous, so go ahead, but don't tell anyone else.
I was introduced to the game of pickleball probably as recently as 5 years ago. And for my demographic, it's a wonderful sport to be able to play both socially and competitively. One of the things that I can say is that pickleball, and I'll let the tennis and badminton people speak for themselves as well, because I think they deserve an earshot, or a moment of your time. We are currently engaged provincially and locally in developing programs for our youth, and we feel that pickleball certainly is a sport that does not only address an opportunity for an older demographic, but for a younger demographic in our population as well. And I know from past experience with curling and other sports, getting into the school system is a wonderful way to introduce sport to our children as they go to school, and to help them grow up with a healthy attitude towards sports. And with respect to badminton, I wonder if, Dave, if you could maybe comment a little bit on our sport of pickleball.
Thank you, John. As a representative of Pickleball BC, I can just give you a quick rundown. In 2011, we had 179 members. It jumped up in 3 years to 873 members, which sounds like a big jump. It's now at 7,800 members, projected 9,000 by next year. That includes 1,500 who didn't come back after COVID so far. John mentioned youth, and that's an important part of our focus. Our organization has put aside some money for youth development, and we sent it out to all the clubs around the province, and within probably less than 2 days, we had, I think, 15 inquiries and commitments from clubs saying, we want some of that money so we can get involved in youth in our community. We can get to the schools, we can get to the organizations that would appreciate it. We'll supply nets, paddle balls, all that kind of stuff, and they can get started on the sport. So we're trying to grow it down from the old folks back down to the youth, and make sure we can fill in all the gaps in between.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eaton.
Thanks, Dave. I know we're running over our 5 minutes, but for unanswered questions and unasked questions, I wonder if Janice could speak very briefly about badminton.
I'm going to suggest, I'm sorry because it is a very full agenda this morning, that you're welcome to send to Mayor and Council a list of those questions and your answers. I assure you that Council reads the material it receives.
Yes, I do appreciate that, and I do thank you very much. I did get a response back when I sent in our detailed list of information, and I do thank you for this opportunity to present in front of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next is Sean Owen and Rick Bevis. I'm going to assume Mariners Volleyball Club beach volleyball court expansion at Bowen Park. Good morning, gentlemen, and I think you're probably aware of the rules. 5 minutes. At 4 minutes, I'll try and give you a signal. I'll be sharper than I was with the first delegation.
Perfect. Yeah, sliding scale. I do appreciate your guys' time. My name's Sean Owen, and I'm the president of the Mariners Volleyball Club, and my partner, Rick Bevis, and he's our technical director. And I'd just like to ask, how many of you guys would agree that participating in sport activity or play is vital to somebody's, to an athlete, to a child, to a male, to a female's health and well-being? Anyone not? No? Thank you. Yeah, it's, how do we move this forward? Which button is it? Did I get it? It looks like I messed it up. how many of you guys know that the number one sport in the world played via participants is soccer or football? How many of you guys are aware of that? The number one played sport? A few of you guys. Did you guys know that number two most participated in sport is the sport of volleyball? Like for me, having played volleyball my entire life, well, almost my entire life, I was very surprised by this. And one of the largest membership of participants is females. And one of the things that I've observed as an athlete, as a coach, as a teacher, as an ambassador for sport is that in Nanaimo, in our country, in our world, we have a lot of opportunities for male-dominated sport. And when we look at the driving numbers in COVID, in this pandemic time, we're seeing, as you can see on the right there, the impact of specifically females in sport. We're seeing that through the pandemic, we're losing 90% of our female athletes, which is having a direct impact on mental health, physical health, and that social connection to people around them. And our sport represents something that's very female dominated. And I'm not here to talk about, just volleyball. We're here specifically to talk about outdoor volleyball, but indoor volleyball represents the same thing. And our limiting factor is always around facilities. And what kind of things can we do to create more opportunities for kids, for adults, for people who really see a need to play this sport in our community specifically? Now, a little bit about Mariners Volleyball. We created a not-for-profit organization in 2015, and in the initial year, we had 45 teams. Okay, and what we've grown pre-pandemic, we had 20 teams. We have approximately 325 members. 2021, in pandemic times, we really worked with facilities to be able to offer an indoor volleyball for kids. But I can tell you right now, just an example of those really important years, 12, 13, 14, we will have, 70 to 80 girls register for a program that only has space for 48. That's on the indoor side. In the spring of 2021, we opened up the opportunity to play beach volleyball. And for us in Nanaimo, there's 4 courts that are possible to be utilized. And at any one time, there's only 3 courts. So it really is very limiting in terms of what kind of programming we can offer to kids in our community. And what we're seeing is that those kids and adults and people within Nanaimo are driving our economic dollars towards Parksville that are the only community really within our reach to offer programming. So I'm just going to bring up Rick here to talk about where the gap is and a possible solution to that gap.
You're just about down to 1 minute. Good morning and welcome.
Morning, thank you. So as Sean mentioned, we have a very, very active beach volleyball scene, particularly in the months of late April till the end of August. And we have limited space. So our proposal is straightforward, is that we're interested in partnering with the city to expand the space that's currently available at Bowen Park. There's a tremendous need, and recreational use is bursting at the seams as well, and we have a very vibrant community. So it's really straightforward, is that we've proposed to the city, and a proposal went in on May 11th, I believe, to expand the current site to an additional 3 courts. And that would hopefully alleviate some of the stress that's placed on the court for both programming and recreational use. So Mariners Volleyball Club is very interested in partnering with the city, and over the last year we have worked to improve the maintenance of the court and improve some of the amenities at the court. And so that partnership has already been growing, but it hasn't been formalized. And so from a visual perspective here, you can see how it would be impacted, would take out some of the parking area, and we would try to make it so that it would be accessible to all. We have a number of athletes whose parents are in wheelchairs, so that was an important component, that they would be able to watch their children play. So we have ideas around new fencing, or ideas around new infrastructure in terms of posts. Right now, the facility doesn't serve our needs in terms of the infrastructure at all, because the posts don't go up and down. The fencing is not suitable. And one of the biggest drawbacks of the facility, and I really hope that this will be addressed, is the impact of disc golf on our facility. It's actually very, very dangerous to play at our facility because of disc golf. So in terms of this slide, you can see the value that we place on the economic health, the livability.
Sir, I'm going
safe
to try and
outdoor
ask you to
spaces.
wrap it up reasonably quickly. I think I've indulged you almost as much as I did the previous delegation, so there will be questions.
I'm okay. I'll keep going, and I'm just looking for equity as well. So we'll just leave it at questions. People have the proposal in front of you, and Sean and I think, are more than able to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and like all sports, I see the value in them, but this is a really fun sport. But you mentioned you just slid by it, something about it, something being dangerous, and I didn't pick up on what that was.
Well, as you can see from the visual, our courts, which have been in Bowen Park since about 1999 or 2000, after that time, disc golf course that runs through Bowen Park was put in. And so they overlap. So we're down there all day and in evenings in May and June, and disc golf has exploded in popularity through COVID as well. And so we actually tracked how many times our athletes were hit by, and coaches were hit by discs, and how many times it comes on the sand. So it's another issue that needs to be addressed within the expansion of how we're going to protect both parties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Councillor Brown and then Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you. Through you to the delegation, I'm just curious, obviously there's the talk about, or the proposal for expansion, but just pulling it back, is this the best place for sand courts in Nanaimo? I'm just thinking, it's in the valley, you're playing outside in the summertime, limited, with extended daylight hours, but trying to maximize that.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and it's a very poignant question. Space is at a premium in our city. With the ocean and the mountains. So is it the absolute best space? Well, it has a lot of value. It's central. Bowen Park is a beautiful gem, so we want people to go there. It's a brilliant place. But are there alternatives? We explored the idea of a complex on 3rd Street, but we were told there's not enough space there. That would serve our community really well. Right now there's a beach volleyball academy that's run out of NDSS. So, that's right across the street. We did explore that, and we were told that there's not suitable space there because of probably riparian zones and different issues around stormwater. We would love to have a large space. We would love to take the infield of Caledonia Park, but that might not be realistic. So, in other cities, so for example in Winnipeg, they've taken an underused track facility, and they've taken out the infield and filled it with beach volleyball courts. And so that there always are alternatives, and I'm sure we'd love to sit down and discuss if there are other viable places to house a suitable facility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you both again. Sean, it's been a long time. And thank you for your efforts with sports in Nanaimo and developing youth and getting them involved and keeping active. A couple of points, and I will again, excuse me, repeat what I said to the first delegation, that it's important that council hears from user groups what they see their needs are for facilities, because if we don't hear from you, we just don't know. So that's really important, and thank you for being here today. I will have follow-up questions to Mr. Harding regarding our space availability and options. I'm curious, I'm sure you're aware that, or probably aware that Nanaimo is in line for another BC Summer Games in about 4 years' time. We've held them 3 times already. Beach volleyball is part of that. Mm-hmm. Where has that been held when Nanaimo has hosted the games?
So it has been held on these courts. In fact, these courts were originally built for the BC Summer Games, for the first ones that were held in Nanaimo, I believe. And at that time, there was lower fencing, and so we have upgraded a little bit. However, in subsequent games, that venue was deemed to be not suitable. So in fact, the beach volleyball venue was moved to Parksville. And that's an issue that we have because we have a lot of people in the volleyball community that travel to Parksville several times a week, that stop at the Dairy Queen in Parksville after that they're traveling and their dollars are being spent in Parksville because they have a facility there that has 30 courts. So they've developed a culture there, and people from Nanaimo probably, I think they have about 600 people participating in the spring, and I'd say at least a third more towards a half of those people are from Nanaimo.
Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the games, it wouldn't be suitable to host beach volleyball here in Nanaimo.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you said 30 courts in Parksville?
They have 30 courts. So they basically have a large area off the beach that they've put in 30 courts.
And same question as I asked the previous delegation, pulling it out of the air practically, I appreciate this. Any idea of the potential cost?
Well, like I said, the proposal was sent to the city on May 11th, and unfortunately, we haven't had any dialogue around that. Okay. The Mariners Volleyball Club is willing to put towards a financial contribution to this, as well as ongoing maintenance and support for the facility.
Mr. Harding, can you even give me a figure out of the air?
We're probably, if we want to do some of the other improvements, we'll have to do a little bit of cut and fill on this thing and retaining walls and such. Probably a couple $100,000. It could be less than that, but we haven't done the complete costing of it.
Assuming we did it there, if we were going to do it, and Councillor Brown's question comment, I think, was appropriate. Is this the?
I can update council on a few of those points later.
Okay, thank you.
Your Worship, I believe Councillor Armstrong is wishing to speak too.
Sorry, Councillor Armstrong, ignoring you on the screen.
Thank you. The same question as asked at the delegation. Do you know how many people from Nanaimo participate in the sport, including those that do go to Parksville? And possibly Ladysmith too, as they do have a couple courts?
So we have over 300 young athletes in our program in Mariners Volleyball Club. The courts are also utilized by the NDSS Beach Volleyball Academy. So they would have over 100 student athletes that participate in the spring. VIU runs a course there every spring, and then the recreational drop-in use. So overall, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 800 people would be using the courts in Nanaimo. And many of those same people are leaving to go to Parksville to play at those courts up there.
And just to follow up, and if you don't know the answer, I can direct it to Mr. Harding after. Is the cost of maintenance relatively low?
Sorry, I think that most of the maintenance is done this year by the club. So the city was very generous and purchased it's called a sandroo. It's a machine that we pull on the sand to level the sand. They only come in and grade it once or twice a summer, which is a challenge for both parties. We have tried to negotiate a small tractor, such as that you use to pull an infield in baseball. So we're kind of developing that relationship with the city, and we're very thankful for that relationship, but it's still evolving. So generally, maintenance costs are very, very low, especially compared to cutting grass or other outdoor facilities. In terms of human resources, it's very, very low because we do most of the work ourselves. The initial cost is the sand. It's a very fine masonry sand, and there is some cost to that. But we're also trying to address concerns such as wind loss by putting up windscreens. But that just hasn't evolved yet. I think that the city needed to do an analysis of the wind velocity, so overall the maintenance costs are very low compared to other outdoor facilities. And I know that for a fact because I live across the street from a baseball diamonds in Nanaimo, and there's city workers cutting the grass there almost every day.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I just follow up to Councillor Armstrong, your question about participation? Again, it's hard for us to quantify what potential is there, right? Because, you know, at the beginning I spoke about volleyball being the second most participated sport globally, you know, and certainly we see it here. So our city just does not have the capacity or has the facilities yet to realize any potential of participation. You know, there's 4 courts that most volleyball players may not even know exist because it's just they haven't been found yet, right? So we'll make our way into recreational programs indoors, and you know that's where it is. But volleyball, especially beach volleyball, has become so popular. I think it's just being able to create something that people can migrate to, like bring their kids up through. Young athletes become older athletes, become senior athletes, and volleyball is one of those lifelong sports. So I think that it's just the realization of potential is really important here.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can certainly attest to the popularity of the sport. I manage the Mariners volleyball website, and the registrations fill up like in hours, like in literally hours. And I'm quite sure that if we had more capacity in the city, more people would be able to use not only the volleyball courts, but the other courts that we desperately need around the city. And it's so popular, like one time even crashed a server registrations on one day. So I think there's definitely a need out there for more facilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question. Obviously, you indicated 3. I know quite a few people that go up to Parksville every summer for the drop-in, and even have considered it myself. Is 3 enough? Like, is that like, you know, to make do, or are we looking ahead and saying, you know, this is where?
Councillor Brown, I like the way you think. No, it's not enough. No, it's not enough. But again, I think we're dealing in a scenario where we're build it and they will come. We know that with 7 courts, we don't have to turn away young participants. We know with 7 courts, we could host tournaments, whether they're for kids or whether they're for adults. We could run an amazing BC Summer Games event. Bowen Park is a beautiful place and it's a beautiful venue. If it was safer, that would be fantastic. Obviously, there's some challenges around the safety overall in Bowen Park. You know, we have to send our athletes in groups to use the washrooms and things like that. So Bowen Park has its challenges, but it also has its benefits. If we were to build a 10, 12, 20 court facility, people would come. It would be a flagship facility. So if this was to move to Bevan Park, where there's more space, could we have an outstanding facility? Absolutely, but with that, there's more cost. And so that's a cost analysis. So, you know, I'd love to entertain more dialogue on that. I don't want to take up council's time, but it is another possibility, and with Mr. Harding, you know, to discuss. I'm not sure where that other location is, okay, but build it and they will come. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kesselbrook.
Thanks, Your Worship, and through you to the delegation, thanks for coming today. And this is an obvious gap, and I'm always surprised at how many people are consistently at the beach volleyball courts whenever I go by there. And I was unaware that there was a beach volleyball academy at one of the high schools. And I'm just curious, is the Mariners Club associated with that academy, and what's the demand for enrollment in that academy in Nanaimo?
Well, thank you. So I'm involved in that academy as one of the lead coaches. It's part of my professional development as a instructor at VIU, as a professor at VIU, and then I'm the technical director for the club. So we have a small coaching community, and so there is a lot of crossover between the club and its coaches and the academy and its coaches. Of course, there's also a crossover of athletes. So they turn away participants to the academy. It's a first come, first serve application process, and every year there's more students wishing to get into that academy than there is space available. So with more courts available, that academy could also grow. there's two sections of, or two cohorts in that academy. And if we had more courts, they could definitely add another cohort. So with growth, they will come.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you. And sorry if I missed some of that information at the start there. I came in halfway because I had another engagement. Thanks.
Seeing no further questions, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this morning. I believe you presented your material to Ms. Gurry. That's great. It's always helpful for council to have something to read afterwards or before.
All right. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. The next item is reports, and the first is
sorry, Your Worship, I think there's questions.
Councillor Thorpe.
If I may, Your Worship, I'd indicated, thank you, that I would have
thank you.
Some questions for Mr. Harding as a follow-up. And I'm just curious, and I don't want to put you on the spot at the spur of the moment, Mr. Harding, but related to both the delegations. First of all, the general feasibility of the badminton, tennis, pickleball facility being part of the Bevan Park Master Plan, which I think was updated in 2015, and we've had other commitments and challenges since then, but just in general, whether that would fit. And second, with the volleyball, the outdoor volleyball delegation, the feasibility of expansion down at the current site. If you could just comment generally.
Right. I thank you, Worship, Councillor Thorpe. We go a little bit broader. So both organizations, and this brings us back to why we need to do an updated Parks, Recreation, and Culture Master Plan, and we're doing that through Reimagine. So both of these organizations and their sub-organizations have all been actively involved in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of Reimagine, which we really appreciate. And that's where we're taking a lot of that information and data. So when we come back to council with a updated master plan, we can show you some of those trends, what the general public wants, what some of the specific user groups are wanting. And so I just really want to mention that this is ongoing, and there's opportunities and trends that the community will see when we come back with some of that broader Parks, Recreation, Culture Master Plan through Reimagine. Specifically to the Bevan Park Master Plan and the use that was presented by the racket groups, the master plan that was adopted, as mentioned, 2015, totally outlines opportunities like that type of development. So there's a variety of developments that can happen within what we used to call the equestrian or VIX ground area. That's all come back to the city from some leases. And so those areas are open to a variety of different built facilities such as that. And there's been other proposals, as council knows, through an Indigenous center, also a food farmers market, and a variety of others. So these types of developments are specifically in there. And I'd also say with some of we'll also see council see through the Reimagine and some of the other projects that council has done on sports, particularly with the artificial turfs. The artificial turfs have actually opened up a lot of other opportunities for some fields that aren't being used as much. Some of our older natural grass fields, it opens up to other possibilities for use that we didn't have a number of years ago because the natural turf fields were so needed. Now with the artificial turfs, and if we're successful with our grant, we could have up to 5 artificial turfs in the next little bit. It opens up even more. So opportunities with the sand volleyball is shoehorned in there. The disc golf was before sand volleyball. That's why we put an alternative tee box in, so that the disc golf was there. It also has a strong proposal that wants to come to council for improvements, because we have a lot of groups and organizations giving us proposals of things they want to improve. So I hope that answers. I know it's a longer answer to it, but a lot of this stuff is in the works.
Thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, a follow-up question, which perhaps is to you. Would it be appropriate, do you think, that the proposals by both of these delegations be part of items added to the list being drawn up by the infrastructure subcommittee of the mayor's leadership table?
I certainly don't see any reason not to.
They would at least get them on the radar. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Entirely
Harding.
appropriate. Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just I won't call it a word of caution, but something that should be investigated prior to making any firm decisions, and that's the academies in the high schools. I was involved in refereeing field lacrosse for the academy at NDSS, and now this is going back a couple of years because I'm out of it now. There was a challenge with regard to the number of student spaces at NDSS that limited the number of out-of-area athletes that could take part in the academy, and I'm only suggesting that maybe a discussion with the school district might be appropriate to find out whether or not the capacity NDSS is there to have additional students from outside their area for beach volleyball. Thank you.
Mr. Harding, would you like to comment on that?
Specifically to the academy, as council knows, we work closely with the school board on a variety of things, and we can definitely on that one talk about. In fact, I'm meeting with the superintendent Friday at the NDSS fields to talk about a number of issues. So we can bring that forward with them, talk about it.
Very good. Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. A comment on bringing these forward to the Mayor's leadership table on infrastructure. I'm curious, hearing from Mr. Harding that these are two proposals that have come forward, but there will undoubtedly be more. I wonder if there shouldn't be a process for bringing those proposals together at once, so we're not advantaging those who came first and looking at it holistically. Just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we need to get on with fossil fuel divestment and responsible investing. Ms. Mercer, good morning.
Good morning, Your Worship. So in August, Council asked staff to bring back a report on investment options around investing in fossil fuel-free instruments. So to that end, Finance looked into what other municipalities were doing, what investment tools were out there that we could invest in, and 3, what the financial impact would be to making changes to our current policy. So municipal investment criteria is laid out in the community charter, and municipalities are very limited in what we can invest in. So, and I also think it's important to note that the city does not have any direct exposure to the fossil fuel sector. So we can't go out and invest in oil stocks and oil company stock. We're very limited as to the type of investment we can invest in. So when the city goes out to market to purchase investments, the following criteria are considered. So we look at quality or the safety of the investment. So all of the investments have to meet a certain rating. So that's a AAA, AA, or single A investment. And those are brokerage firms rate the different instruments. So we look at looking for the highest quality rated investment. We also look at liquidity. So we must maintain a certain amount of liquidity to meet our ongoing expenses. So we look at our upcoming cash needs and then invest accordingly in a mix of short-term to long-term investments depending on our cash flow needs. Then we look at return. So we want to maximize the return on our investment. So the higher the yield, the less taxation revenue is needed to balance the budget. So we also, lastly, we look at diversification. So we make sure our portfolio isn't heavily loaded into one institution or one type of investment. So what you will find is all of these 4 criteria are found in almost all municipal investment policies. So what isn't common in all investment policies is the consideration of socially responsible investing, and I call it SRIs. And some communities have incorporated this in, while many others haven't. So listed in attachment D of the report are excerpts from municipalities and districts that we found that had added wording to their policies for this. And what we found was the wording was quite similar between the ones that we did find. Now, we didn't do a look at all 162 municipalities in investment policies, but we did look at a lot of them, and these were I think we had 5 that we did find. Not everything's online, but we did do quite a bit of an exhaustive search. So in August, we went to market with $25 million to invest. So that's standard practice for us after tax season. So in the request, we specifically asked the brokers to provide us quotes for fossil fuel-free instruments. So unfortunately, we, not one of the 30 brokers we reached out to provided an SRI quote or an option. And staff spoke to a few of the brokers, but neither, either they had nothing to offer or the rates were so low they didn't quote us. And so having said that, we did continue to do some research. And so based on what staff found was that the city has the following investment options available given our investing requirements through the community charter. So the first one is the fossil fuel free short-term bond fund through MFABC. So this fund is screened to remove any investment in coal, oil, and natural gas processing, extraction, and transportation activities. So at the time of writing this report, the yield to maturity on the bond was 0.82%. So this is considerably lower than what the city was able to purchase out on the market, the regular market. And currently there are only 10 of BC's 162 municipalities that are investing in this bond fund. So the second is pooled high interest savings accounts, or HISA accounts, and there are 3 bank-backed HISA options with MFABC that are deemed fossil fuel free. So, and Scotiabank is one of those 3 bank-backed HISA accounts that they offer. And the city's bank is Scotiabank. So currently we hold approximately $55 million in Scotia's HISA account. We own that directly through the bank rather than MFABC. But the city's HISA account is the same as the one MFABC offers. They just don't market it as a fossil fuel-free investment. That is our understanding through our conversations with both organizations. So, and the third option is green or sustainable bank bonds. Now, these focus on investments in projects that contribute to a low-carbon economy. So these bonds are in low supply, and the yield on average is 0.15 to 0.2% lower than conventional bonds. So there is a discrepancy between the rates between these bonds and regular bonds. So to show the impact that these type of investments would have on our revenue, we would compare the investments we made in August to what we could have made if we invested in the MFA's fossil fuel short-term bond fund. So based on our investments we made in August of this year, our annual interest yield is about $380,500. So that's our annual interest income. If we had taken that $25 million and invested it in the short-term bond fund, the annual interest would yield $205,000. So the difference is $175,500. And that's a considerable difference. And the shortfall in revenue would need to be made up from property taxes in future years' budgets. So if we continue to invest in that, the amount of interest would likely go down, and we would need to rely on taxes more to balance the budget. So while it's important to look at socially responsible investing, it's also important to look at the financial impact of making any change as well. So currently the rates are low for SRIs, but that's not to say they'll stay low forever. And if council is interested in incorporating SRIs into the investment policy, I would suggest a slow and measured approach with a review of the strategy every few years. As the market is likely going to change to offer more SRI investment tools in the future, and then we can, update our policy to reflect the change in what's available in the market. And this will achieve the goal of responsible investing while still maintaining a relatively healthy level of investment income, so we don't have to rely on taxes. So that's kind of a quick overview of the report and our findings, and Mr. Bailey and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer, and thank you to you and your staff for getting this report back to council so quickly. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, and I was very impressed with it because it provided for me the information I think that was needed for us to even review this. I think our responsibility to the taxpayers is of utmost importance, and so how we invest our money and how we try and save taxpayers from any increases, it's important that we know how we're investing and where we're investing. But the option you have presented as option one, and actually just to get it on the table, I'll move option one if I have a seconder.
Your worship, I'm not sure.
second.
Councillor Armstrong is second. Yes, she's seconding.
Thank you. I'll just,
Councillor Armstrong has moved it, or, seconded?
Yeah, Councillor Armstrong seconded the motion, unless somebody else had.
and I'll just speak to it. And I really thank you for presenting this option because I'll read it out. Where possible, socially responsible investing and green investing criteria will be applied to the selection of investments. The city's investment program will consider SRI products that adhere to its statutory requirements and meet the objectives laid out in the policy. Organizations that adopt a socially responsible investment platform are preferred, where SRI and green investments are within 5% of the maximum yields. SRI or green facilities will be exercised. So if I'm understanding that correctly, because it's about the yields, it means that we really have to be earning the potential to earn the same amount as we would in other investments. Thank you. We would start to incorporate social responsible investments in our policy, but we would not be putting at risk the investments that we do have. And it's the same wording that is used in the Capital Regional District's investment policies and what other cities are looking at incorporating as well. So I definitely support this because I was really concerned about us losing money. And I think if we can make sure we're taking social responsibility into account, then we will be living up to our principles of the donut economy. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll apologize to council when we've got several members on Zoom and some around the table. I'm not going to get you all in order appropriately. I'm going to go to Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Brown, and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thank you. I think this is an interesting concept too, and I think one of the things that you have to look at is socially responsible, because when you do look at Canadian oil, it is the most socially responsible in the world. Right now, we're already in the last, I think it's 30 years, we've been imported over $604 billion in oil, mainly from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kazakhstan. So those aren't socially responsible countries. So that's always been a big concern for me. And the other big concern I have is that, you take a look at COVID. If it wasn't for petroleum products, we would not have solved COVID. We have to be really, and I understand the move against fossil fuels, and I do agree to that, but we also have to remember that fossil fuels is only not even 40% of oil production has gone to fossil fuels, because half of our hospital is based on petroleum products. You take a look around the room. So we have to be careful when we start talking about divesting from fossil fuels that we don't forget about petroleum itself, which is also used in the making of solar panels as well as wind turbines. So, I like this because if we're going to look towards social responsibility, oil in Canada is socially responsible, and the predictions are oil is going to go over $200 a barrel within the next 3 years, and OPEC doesn't have the capacity to even keep up with worldwide demand, which is increasing. So I think this sort of covers that off. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Worship. I definitely will not be supporting this. I think if you declare climate emergency, if you put forward values, you have to live by them. This is definitely not that. And essentially, to delay is to deny a better future for our children and grandchildren. So I think anything other than option 3 is misguided and ultimately short-sighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Gesselbrock, and then Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I definitely would ask councillors to step back and really look at what the different options are and would do. Option 1 essentially will do nothing, because right now there is no fossil fuel alternative investment instruments that are within the 5% margin, and probably won't be for a long time. So all our money is still in securities that do have fossil fuel investments, even though it's not, we're directly investing in a fossil fuel industry. The package, the GIC or the bond will have part of those companies in the portfolio. And so, there has been work done to create financial instruments for us to have to do this investment. And the stats that Councillor Armstrong put out about the degree of fossil fuel investment and production, I don't believe are accurate. Canada is not even coming close to meeting its emissions reduction or strategy, because we don't even calculate the amount of fossil fuels that we export, and the industry is much within the tar sands and gas is causing extreme environmental degradation, and to not take that into consideration, I think, is denialism. And yes, we do rely on plastics, but that does not mean that we have to actively invest in the expansion of them. I think it would be absurd for us to bring a motion forward to say, hey, we could get an extra 0.5% investment return by investing in this financial products that are socially and environmentally irresponsible. Although there's a clear link that these securities are counter to our municipal goals and values, we could sure use the extra money. That's actually the situation we're in right now, and we need to get out. And there may, be only 10 municipalities that are actively engaging in this, but we need to take leadership and create the demand. The returns that we will get from these type of investments are going to increase. Right now, what we're getting in terms of all our investments is low. Like before, we were getting above 3% on our investments. It's dropped down to 1.5%, and the difference between the SRI investments are only a 0.5%, and some are a bit lower, but it's going to be incremental, the shock that we're going to take, because we do it in 2 to 3 year increments. So maybe this year we'd lose out on $200,000, and it's going to be spread out over a 3-4 year period. And as we see the percentage of what you get return from an SRI increase, that margin is going to decrease. And this is what it's all about, is that we're dependent on a revenue stream that is environmentally and socially unsustainable. And so, yeah, obviously we're going to take a hit. So to say that we want to avoid any financial hit to the community is the whole purpose, is that's what we have to take responsibility for, so that we can create a new economic demand in the other direction. And I hope there will be more financial instruments that are available to municipalities, and that will happen when it shows a clear demand. And by Nanaimo taking a stand, and option 3, I believe, is the way forward, it's going to start putting the message out that there is a demand, and more municipalities will come on board. Thank you. So I will not be supporting this, and hope that other councillors will, reflect on this and potentially look at other options. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, and then Councillor Turley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Excuse me again. No, I appreciate the report from staff. I found it very interesting indeed. And especially when the basis of the motion was to have the city divest from fossil fuel investments. And we find out in the report that, in fact, we do not actually invest in fossil fuel investments directly anyway. That said, I am willing to support option 1. I'm not willing to support either of the other options. I think option 1 is a reasonable compromise. But I'm very concerned that, again, we're forgetting our mandate as leaders in this city, which is to run the city responsibly. And by that, a large part of that responsibility is fiscal responsibility, as Councillor Martman mentioned. The reality is that a drastic change to our investment policy, in my opinion, will have absolute zero beneficial effect on the global climate situation, absolute zero. What it will affect is our city's revenue stream, and that in turn will affect taxation and our ability to fund future projects. So on the balance, as I say, I'm willing to support option 1 as a step, as a reasonable compromise, But I turn to the conclusion of staff's report, and for the benefit of listeners who don't have it in front of them, if I may, I'll read the 3 sentences that it states. Socially responsible investment products that meet legislative requirements are currently not plentiful, and their return on investment is lower than other available investment products. Changing the City of Nanaimo investment policy to include social responsible investment products in the portfolio has the potential to decrease portfolio earnings. Decreased investment earnings will put pressure on both taxation and future project funding. So we are jeopardizing our future funding, future projects, and to what end? To what benefit? To none that I can see. So I appreciate the views of Councillors Geselbrecht and Brown as they've expressed them, but I do not agree with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. I think Councillor Thorpe stole my thunder, but I just wanted to confirm again that we're not aware of any fossil fuel investment shares or bonds in our portfolio at the time, at this point.
Through your worship to Councillor Turley, yes, at the moment, we do not know of any of our investments that are directly investing in the fossil fuel industry. We don't have, like I say, we don't have any direct shares or anything like that. We do buy GICs, and I think we have some other bonds. And to, you know, we're not, I can't tell you exactly what each one of those is invested in.
Yep, thank you.
Councillor Bonner and then Councillor Geselbrecht again.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe a question to staff. If this option goes forward, will it change any of our investments whatsoever? Because if I read it, the 5%, it would have to be almost on par with investments in, say, fossil fuel type funds before we would even consider it. So as it sits right now, if we were to pass this motion, will any of our investments change whatsoever?
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner. So based on what we saw in August, we would have invested in the same products. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't say what's gonna, when the next time we go out to invest, what the rates are gonna be. I know they're projecting rates to, you know, go up for next year, but to how that affects the different types of investments, I cannot comment on that at this point because I don't know. But if we were looking, if we had this policy in this item in our investment policy in August, we would have invested in the same products.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm going to not vote in favor of this the motion as it sits. When we declared a climate emergency, nobody, I think, considered the fact that getting out of this climate mess that we're in was going to be cheap. And we have to make not only financial decisions to move down that path, but also, in this case, this may be just a symbolic decision if all of our investments are going to change anyway. But I believe that we should be making these statements, we're making these policies that say we're interested in becoming part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thanks very much.
Councillor Geselbrecht and then Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I think it's a red herring to say that we're not invested in the fossil fuel industry because we can't directly invest in corporations that are in that. And so I think Ms. Mercer accurately described our knowledge about what we're invested in is that these GICs or bonds contain portfolios that do have fossil fuel companies. That's why the MFA created a fossil fuel free option. Right now, with option 1 on the table, this is a do nothing option that just maintains the status quo. And if we are concerned about, the tax hit that this could potentially have, if we divested everything right away, we'd be looking at maybe a 0.4 impact, in the next couple years. The important thing is that we have the ability to have a bit more nuanced of an approach to this if we want to adjust how much we're willing to impact our taxation. Right now, we're not willing to impact it at all. But it's not to say that we can move that 5% to maybe 10%, invest in things that are near 10% to what a regular return would be, or to 15 or 20%, or even in option 2, we could say instead of at the very least 10% of our investments will be in socially responsible, but we can expand that to be 30, 40%, 50%, and we can see what the tax impact would that be. Would that be $100,000 this year, or $200,000 this year, or $300,000 this year, or $500,000 over the next 4 years? But let's have that conversation. I think we just blasted out of the mark on something that I think we need to unpack a little bit deeper, because right now we're just blowing smoke.
That was a dreadful analogy, Councillor Gesselbrock, blowing smoke. I don't know if you were being that funny this morning. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I disagree that we're blowing smoke. I believe that this is the first step to saying how we can invest going forward. If you are correct, Councillor Gesselbrock, in a couple of years, and some of these investments, we can't stop right now anyways, as the more socially responsible investments occur and as their interest rates grow, once they become more equitable, then we would look at investing in them. But I would rather be fiscally responsible, take that money that would cost the taxpayers and put it into our social programs right here locally in our city, where I think it's far more important than worrying about us having an impact globally on how we invest. Thank you.
And back to Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try to keep it short. I think Councillor Gesselbrock really hit the nail on the head, though, about unpacking this and making decisions. I think going with option 1 here, if you truly believe that Nanaimo has no impact on anything, then don't make any decision with a global lens. But I don't think that's actually, people hold that to be true. We do all the time. And I don't think we should kid ourselves here, because there's like half a century of clear environmental growing awareness. And at the same time, like, these arguments are like 20, 30, 40 years old. And, we're paying for infrastructure to be, and now it's right size, but it would have been oversized 20 years ago in our own city based on changing climate models, which are, if people would have acted when all the science said we should have, we wouldn't be having to make so-called drastic changes at 0.5% around taxation. Like this, to me, this is just totally insane that we will even put forward an argument that that justifies holding on to decade-old beliefs. And this is, to me, this is not a radical proposition, especially, I think, as Councillor Gesselbrock outlined it, around making these changes to one, they show market demand for these products, and that is classic sort of social investing theory. Is you put your money where your values are to drive change, and second of all, it's not a radical proposition, especially due to the phasing that we would have to do and how we could absorb that. So I 100% agree that option 1 is nothing other than a status quo option. To me, anything other than option 3 doesn't even make sense. But option 2, I think, provides a path forward, at least to see the change that I think I hear people talking about. But I don't see that in option 1. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff, for this report. I honestly, I came in quite open to the conversation. I really preferred option 2 because while I don't believe option 1 is doing nothing, I do believe it gives us the impression of doing something more than we're actually doing. Given this is a new investment opportunity and something we're wrestling with in terms of the returns for taxpayers, I think option 2 gives us a nice kind of middle of the road. We can look at the 10% now, still be invested in the other ways, and 90% that we know we can kind of share that with taxpayers. So I'm not a fan of option 3. I don't think that's something the taxpayers could support. And while I do believe it's our job to be leaders in the city and to bring new ideas forward and to kind of be at the leading edge of that, I also think we have to respect that we also need to represent a great number of people at this table. So I'm not going to vote in support of option 1, and if it fails, I will move option 2. Thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think there's one area that hasn't been considered in this whole discussion, and that is what the corporations that are involved in fossil fuels, production, distribution, et cetera, and that is the item that Councillor Armstrong had referred to, and that is all the products that are produced from fossil fuels through the development of polymers. And that is a huge portion of all our lives in this community, from health to whatever. So the challenge I have with options other than option 1 is that how can we invoke a policy with minimal knowledge of what the investment is allowing companies to do? In other words, these companies are not any company that stands still fails for the most part. So they're always looking for other products that they can develop and market. And the way forward, given our style of life, is even with electric bikes. I mean, they've got plastics and products on those that are developed with polymers. So that I see is potentially the investment opportunities in the future. So at best, by invoking a SRI position is a nice buzzword, but in reality, at worst, it's holding back our ability to reach our environmental goals. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Council. It's been a most interesting debate this morning. I'm going to go back to where Councillor Thorpe started on this. The way I read the report, unless I am completely obtuse, and that is certainly a possibility, at the present time, we have no direct investments in the fossil fuel industry. All of our money appears to be in GICs and safe investments. And with great respect, is there somebody around this table who doesn't have their money in a bank or a credit union? Let me assure you, they're loaning to all kinds of socially irresponsible corporations and individuals. Hell, even the mafia has its money in banks. So what we're being asked to do, the suggestion is option 2 and option 3, is essentially a choice to say we are going to directly impact, in a negative way, the income of the city of Nanaimo in order to send a signal, if you will, and it is just a signal, let's be blunt about this, a signal around how virtuous we are in this community in our commitment to fighting climate change. And you know something? Everybody gets it. But if I firstly had the problem in this city that we were significantly invested or even invested directly in fossil fuels, I would be more sympathetic perhaps to option 2 and be prepared to say to taxpayers, look, we're going to eat into your income this year because after all, we have been directly irresponsible. But firstly, again, I don't see any evidence that we are in any serious way or even a minimally significant way invested. When it comes to social responsibility, and I'm going to use an extreme example, Councillor Armstrong pointed out that we continue to import millions and millions of dollars of Mideastern oil every year. You want to talk about social responsibility? What was the story out of one of our trading partners, Saudi Arabia, a few years ago? A woman was stoned to death after being found guilty of practicing sorcery? And we're worried about social responsibility? We would rather heat the homes of Nova Scotians who work in the Alberta oil fields with oil imported from a country that stoned a woman to death for sorcery, who is a victim of their judicial system. I don't think she cared when she was dying, and I'm going to be really dramatic here. I don't think she cared about whether the global temperature was going up or down. So if we want to talk about social responsibility, once you're playing in this pool, it gets a bit complex. So I'm not prepared to say to the good citizens of Nanaimo, of all the solutions we could bring forward to this council table that would really assist in us reducing our carbon footprint, in impacting the world consumption of oil, of all the many solutions, this is not the solution. Just this morning, we heard requests that an amount, if it's $300 a square foot, for a $12 billion pickleball facility that I think there was a certain enthusiasm for. We heard from Mr. Sims a week or two ago, $125 million for a much-needed public works facility, which in the event of a disaster, when it collapses and we can't get trucks out to service a devastated population, is going to look pretty silly. We have a police station that needs replacement. We have a waterfront walkway enthusiastically supported by the majority of the public, question whether they're prepared to spend money on it. Councillor Brown said, suggested, no one believes that Nanaimo has no impact. You're absolutely right. Nanaimo has an impact. I just have to say to the good people of Nanaimo, if you want to have an impact on climate change, tell us to bring in a policy that requires us to spend $500,000 a year putting more trees inside the city limits of Nanaimo. That will have a far bigger impact on climate change than this motion will, by signaling virtuously that we're a wonderful community and we're getting out of investing in something we apparently haven't been investing in anyway. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to support this, particularly when, if I look at the figures and I understand them correctly, if we went for option 3, it's basically a 1% tax increase. The reduction in income is a 1% tax increase. So I'm looking at Ms. Mercer. It's a $1.3 million difference, according to your figures on page 18. Am I correct in that, Ms. Mercer? If we go for 100% fossil-free fund as of August 19th, as opposed to what we have, it's between, the differences between the, total earnings were 2.89, and that would drop it to 1.52. So it's a 1.2. So it's almost a 1% tax increase on the nose. No, I'm not prepared to say to the citizens of Nanaimo, in order to send some signal, that we go for the suggested option 3 that Councillors Brown and Gesselbrock have suggested. I'm just not prepared to do it. I want practical solutions that make sense in this community. I'm not prepared to tell this community that they would have any real impact on climate change by doing this, other than making perhaps us feel better, and the other communities have chosen to go a somewhat different route. Again, if there was a problem, I'd be prepared to, a problem with our investing now, I'd be prepared to address it. What option 1 is sending a signal, if you will, in a much gentler way. We're not prepared to demand, and that's what the option 2 and 3 are, we're not prepared to demand that you have a tax increase through the back door by reducing our income. I'm not prepared to support that. And I appreciate I've inspired a couple speakers, or well, one anyway, Councillor Gesselbrock. I'm going to suggest you keep it to some limit, please. I think this is the 4th time you've spoken to the motion.
Thank you. I think downplaying, making this move as virtue signaling is a disservice. Our financial system does prop up our entire economy and how everything works, and we need to all work together to untangle ourselves. Divestment from fossil fuel is one small action to take, and it doesn't have to be all at once to create a 1% tax increase, because I think that's just fear-mongering. We can do it in a more measured way, and there's other options. We can say 10% of our portfolio will be in fossil fuel divestment. We could say 20%. We can adjust it. But right now, the options presented is kind of all or nothing, and that's how the argument is being skewed. I'd like to move to defer a decision on this to the next Finance and Audit Committee, so that we can have a bit more, think about it and have a bit more nuance nuanced conversation on how much we're willing to ask from the community to make movement in this direction, and to get a bit clearer a direction of like what are our current investments and how related they are to the fossil fuel industry. Because right now, I'm hearing thrown out that we're not invested in the fossil fuel industry, and I don't think that's accurate. I think that we have GICs, and I'm not sure if we have any bonds in the moment, but those are portfolios that do contain direct investments in Suncor and organizations like that, and that's why they did create a fossil fuel investment. I don't think any financial instrument that's currently available is ideal, but we got to start making the move in that direction so that it gets better and better, so that we can transform this aspect of municipal investing, and we can play a part in that. It's one small part, but that's how it grows and that's how change happens. So I put a motion to defer this to the next finance and audit. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? Seeing none, on the main motion, Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is really interesting, and it's sparking a lot of passion. And I would suggest to Council, from a very pragmatic standpoint, we have a middle road option in option 2. It allows us to live the values that we've expressed through our Reimagine process and the donut economy and the climate emergency and all of those things that we say are important to us, but it doesn't actually risk our broader portfolio. It keeps that 90% protected in terms of our investment or our return on investment. I also have heard from Ms. Mercer that we expect SRIs to grow, and our ability to buy into them will change over time. So if we keep 10% there and we evaluate that, as staff have suggested in that recommendation, every few years, we're allowed to kind of dip our toe into this, see how it's going, not risk a 1 point something tax increase, and just kind of stay the middle ground in a conversation that has passions on both sides. And I think when that is the case, not entrenching and trying to find the place where everyone feels like they're getting their needs met, at least in a little way, is a good course to take. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong? Councillor Armstrong, you're muted.
Just wanted to call the question. I think we've discussed it lots, and I think most of us have our minds made up.
Thank you very much. Those in favor of the motion, which is option 1. Councillors Martman, Krogh, Thorpe, Turley, and Armstrong. Those opposed, Councillors Hemmens, Brown, Gesselbrock, and Bonner. The motion is defeated. Thank you very much.
No, it passed.
Sorry.
The motion passes.
Passes. Pardon. The motion passes, yes. Wouldn't that be a hoot? All right. We are at 10:30. Councillor Gesselbrock, it's time for the recess, but go ahead, please.
Oh, well, on this, I would also like to move to that we update our current investment policy to include 10% of the city's portfolio to be socially responsible investments.
Firstly, I'm
point of order.
That's
a point of order. That's a movement around what we just voted on.
No, I don't think it is. It can be in addition to the motion, no. And I think it's something that we need to discuss.
I call point of order.
Councillor Gesselbrock, with respect, I'm with Councillor Armstrong. We've had the vote.
This is an additional motion. I do not see anything out of order.
What's out of order? That option was there, and we chose against it.
Why?
Ms. Gurry?
So, Your Worship, point of order was called and you ruled on that point of order. So at this point, your rule stands unless somebody challenges your decision.
Motion to challenge the rule.
So now immediately your ruling needs to be voted on in an affirmative manner. So the question needs to be asked, shall the chair be sustained? And then there's a vote.
And that's the question. Shall the chair be sustained? All those in favor? Councillors Martin?
Just your worship, so just one moment on that, just so everybody's clear. When the chair shall be sustained, that means that if you agree with the mayor, then you're not going to be in favor of the sustainment. You're going to vote opposed 2, shall the chair be sustained? I know it's a little bit confusing. And you, as the chair, don't have a vote. So if you agree that it's not in order, you want to be opposed to shall the chair be sustained. So the question is, shall the chair be sustained? Does everybody have questions about that?
I'm trying to think of the English expression my brother-in-law uses when his head is spinning.
Yes, I know, it's very confusing. So basically, if the mayor's ruling shall be sustained, you are wanting to, like in court, so you want to not be in favor of shall the chair be sustained. It's the opposite. Yes. If you agree with, thank you. If you agree with Councillor Gasselbrock, you're in favor of the chair being sustained. If you agree with your ruling, you're opposed.
Thank you. I think we're clear. Are we clear now? Do I need to go through the list of questioners?
You're not clear, Councillor Thorpe?
Councillor
No,
Thorpe.
I'm sorry. My understanding, Ms. Gurry, is the vote is fairly simple. Shall the chair be sustained in the chair's ruling? The chair's ruling was that the new motion was out of order. So if we're sustaining the chair, we are in favor of the chair's ruling.
It's reverse of that.
Well, of course I trust Ms. Gurry, but I'm surprised.
Yes, so in previous, we had a lot of practice in the
Having
previous
seen the
council.
chair sustained many times.
Yes,
in the past.
and so there was always some confusion, and that's how I have it straight in my head. So it is, if you agree with Councillor Gasselbrock, you are going to be in favor of the chair being sustained. If you agree with the mayor, you're opposed.
All right.
So how, to make it easier, those in favor of the mayor's ruling, how about we ask that question? In favor of the mayor's ruling of it not being in order. So you can vote that way if you would like. And we could put it in minutes.
Yeah, I actually agree with Councillor Thorpe here. If it's worded as if the decision is to sustain the decision of the chair, I think that's very clear, and then it would be for favor. I think the ambiguity comes when we do not include other language. Then the question becomes, what are we sustaining? And so
yes.
if we're calling the vote to sustain the decision of a chair, then I think if you agree with his worship's ruling, it should be an affirmative vote.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, I actually believe you're right, and I'm so sorry that I've twisted this all around. I haven't done this since the previous council, and it was rather confusing there.
Well, it's a first for everything, isn't there?
I'm very sorry. So yes, but your worship, you don't have a vote. I am 100% sure on that. So you can't vote in this question.
So the question is, shall the chair be sustained? Which means that my ruling...
Yes, so if you're in favor of the mayor's ruling, vote in favor. Yes, please. Thank you.
Those in favor, Councillors Martman, Hemmons, Thorpe, Brown, Turley, Bonner, Armstrong, and those opposed, Councillor Gesselbrock. I think that
the chair is sustained, so yes, and I think we need a recess now, Your Worship.
Thank you. We can,
at least I do.
Now, like the playground, we can have recess. Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done.
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in. It just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Oh, yeah, buddy! Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got a kid? Use the lid.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So What we did is we've replaced the original high-pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through a number of different colors that we have pre-programmed here in a pink, a purple, a green. Probably my favorite on here is Rainbow Chase for Pride Week. It'll actually run all the way around the building all the time.
With this new technology, organizations can now request that the bastion be lit to promote their cause by going to the City of Nanaimo website and following the instructions. Go to Your Government, Bastion Lighting Requests, complete the lighting request form, and submit. You will hear from us within a couple days if your request has been approved, and the bastion will be lit in the colors that you have requested. If you have any questions, please contact the Mayor's office at 250-755-4400.
So the next time you're in downtown Nanaimo at night, come on and check out the new dynamic lighting at the Bastion.
We're here today to make a couple street names. There was some vandalism in town, and we're just going to make replacements. And the roads today we're doing are Dundas Street and Bruce Avenue. They're all 8-inch, and we use 3 different sizes, mostly 24-inch, 32-inch, and 36-inch. We do use a consistent font with street names. This is actually my metal blank, so the only material here is the material that I actually will cut out in vinyl. From here we have to take out the vinyl that's not needed, which is the outer. So all we want to do is save the inside borders. From here we actually have to put a transfer tape on it. And what this does is it allows us to take the blue vinyl and pull it away from the clear backing that it's on so we can apply it to our aluminum blank. Now that we have our 2 sheeted piece of vinyl, we take our aluminum blank, which has high intensity diamond grade, which you can see behind me we have all different colors. We have orange, yellow, white, depending on the type of signs. Most of our white signs are regulatory, and the yellow ones are warning signs. And right here, all I'm doing is pushing the transfer tape a little tighter to the vinyl. And then from there, we peel it back, our plastic, which basically leaves us with a big sticker. We put it on the aluminum. And when we're done here, we take our transfer tape off, and as you can see, we're left with Dundas.
As council may recall, back in early-ish 2019, council passed a motion directing staff to move forward with participation in this project that involves a grant. Unfortunately, it took a long time for the Community Energy Association to get the grant and bring it forward. So we're at that stage now where we're ready to engage with them with a participation agreement. So that's why this report's in front of council. It's to direct staff to sign on the participation agreement, as well as allocate the funding necessary to install the chargers and move it forward. So happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong's there, and then Councillors Brown and Turley.
Thank you. This came before us with a report from Ms. Fowler. And she told us that it ended up costing the RDN over $100,000 just in staff time alone to do this. So I don't see the benefit of this. Could we not just do it ourselves? It'd be a lot cheaper, or do you anticipate that it won't cost the additional dollars that it costs the RDN?
Through your worship, Councillor Armstrong, we haven't been tracking detailed staff costs like that. Certainly we're nowhere near that kind of level. I think the amount that we've had to help the consultant along has been more than we anticipated. So there certainly has been some staff time, but those are what we would call sunk costs. So if we were not to move forward with this now, we would have to write those off. But if we do move forward with this, we will get 4 charging stations within Nanaimo, plus I understand the RDN also wants to install one of theirs within Nanaimo, so we'll get 5 out of this for about the cost of 2.
But still, I guess my question still remains, do we have the guarantee that we won't happen into the issue that the RDN did, where it would have been a lot cheaper for the RDN to do it itself without this partnership?
In hindsight, I think we probably would have recommended moving forward on our own. But like I said, a lot of these costs are already sunk. We've already sort of sunk these costs. So
okay,
at this
that's
point
good.
in time, it makes sense to move forward, I think.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Turley, and then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Rosen. So I recall the motion a number of years ago coming to the RDN. And the question at that time I asked was, do the consumers who charge vehicles at these stations pay directly for the electricity they use?
Through your worship, Councillor Turley, presently the city has, I believe it's 5 charging stations, and users do not have to pay for the service right now. In the past, there was an impediment because of some BC Hydro rules. My understanding is that the city could now move forward with like a rate structure to charge for that. So that's something that we're going to be moving forward with in the near future. So both the existing charging stations and these new ones, if we move forward with this, would become pay-for-service type of utilities. It's something that we're going to have to get, obviously, council to adopt a policy on, but it'll likely be 2022 when we do this.
Okay, and the reason I ask about it is because there are private entities that have charging stations, such as Petrocan, and I think it would be unfair of the city to be giving the electricity for free when others have to pay for it themselves and charge a charge at those stations. So, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. And I actually very much agree with Councillor Turley on this. And I think the distinction here for me is this is technology-wise, this doesn't directly, I think we need to move to that charging model as we move forward, but I think whether it's the Petrocan ones, they're probably, what do they call them, stage 3 charging, and this is only stage 2, so it's, using this is, you might gain in electricity, but you definitely pay for in time in comparison. So, but I do think we need to get there. My question, though, is related to just one item in the recommendation that I'm trying to find now. The second recommendation says these would be these would be funded by grant and reallocation of existing resources. I understand reallocation of existing resources from the math is probably quite a low amount in comparison to all we do, but I'm just curious on what that actually means, what's being reallocated, and is it surplus from somewhere else, or is it cutting into potentially realizing another project?
Through your worship to Councillor Brown. So in this case, the transportation group has a number of small general contingencies for unforeseen small-scale transportation items. So such as, adding line painting or markings or signage or some small-scale asphalt work. At this time of year, it's difficult to do that type of work, the painting and the paving and stuff like that. And we're far enough along in the year that we feel comfortable that we can drain a little bit of that account a bit more than we would earlier in the year. So that's what we're looking at is using the $26,000 from one of those transportation general contingency funds.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Would anyone care to make the motion? Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Martman. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Community Program Development Grant, Nanaimo Science and Sustainability Society. We'll toss this one to Mr. Harding. Missed that one, didn't you? It's a pumpkin toss.
Thank you, Worship. We thought we'd leave the bigger decision to the end. Maybe more complex. So just pleased to put forward a small community program. We've had a long history of working successfully with the Science Center, and it's another little program that they're wanting to put on, and staff totally support it. If there's any questions on the program or the grant, I'd be pleased to ask or answer.
Councillor Turley, and then Councillor Hemmons. Sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, to Mr. Harding. I noted in the application form from the Nanaimo Science and Sustainability Society, under question number 7, is this a new program, to which they answered no. And I thought that this program was designed for new programs. I'm confused.
Yes. Thank you. They did this a number of years ago. They haven't done it recently, so that's why they said no. So they're trying to bring it back, and I think it's also been on hiatus with COVID. So they're trying to bring it back and need a little bit of support to get it going again.
So
if that helps you.
Does that meet the criteria of the?
The staff thinks it does, basically got with what they're trying to do, and so I can't remember what year they did it last, but it's one that they want to try and get going again.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hemmons has moved the motion, seconded Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any contrary? None. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And the next is Soroxman Stadium Project Update. Mr. Harding.
Your Worship, this is an information report to Council of some funds transferred to assist us with some unforeseen costs that as we were starting to dig into the old paint and such at the stadium. We just came up with some extra abatement costs, and we're pleased to answer any questions. Mr. Groot is here also if you have any questions on that. That's an information for Council.
I'm not seeing any questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Harding. We have no other business, Ms. Gurry, that I'm aware of. And I don't think there's any, there's nothing on the question period, and Councillor Brown, I think, is therefore moving adjournment. Do we have a seconder with?
No,
Councillor.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Martman.
Do we not need to move the recommendation that council approve, 59,000? Or is that just on an overview? Never mind. Never mind.
All those in favor of adjournment? Any contrary? None? Motion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to staff for attending this morning and the contributions.